Welcome to High Heels and Hidden Truths. I'm Vanessa Murphy, investigative reporter at KLAS TV in Las Vegas. We are going to take a look at the criminal case of Dan Rodimer. He's a former pro wrestler, he was a wannabe politician, and now he's accused of taking another man's life. Now, that man, Christopher Tapp, the alleged victim, had been wrongfully convicted of murder in Idaho. He spent years in prison. He finally became a free man. He was living his life until it was cut short.
Dan Rodimer turning himself in to the Clark County Detention Center Wednesday, 2 days after the former congressional candidate was charged with murder.
This should have never happened.
47-year-old Christopher Tapp died in November of 2023, days after prosecutors say Dan Rodimer punched him at a party inside Resorts World.
It's just bringing back a flood of emotions.
The victim's family hired Tapp's friend, an attorney who helped Tapp get out of prison after spending 2 decades for a rape and murder, of which DNA evidence eventually exonerated him. He says he and Tapp's family will be at every hearing.
We want the process to work itself out. We're not here to influence anybody. We just want justice to be served.
Now, let's start with the life of Christopher Tapp. Back in 1996, a woman in Idaho Falls, Angie Dodge, was raped and stabbed to death. I have my notes here because I didn't directly cover that. Obviously, that was in Idaho. But according to the Innocence Project, which helps connect attorneys with individuals who they believe are wrongfully convicted, they take those sorts of cases. They were involved in Christopher Tapp's case. So again, the Innocence Project. According to their description, Tapp may have ran with a crowd who police believed was connected to Dodge's murder. Now, police interviewed Tapp, and they say he kept changing his story. And then eventually he's promised a deal for giving information. Now, the Innocence Project notes he's given at least 5 polygraphs. I believe it was more. Police give him false promises, right? And he's even with police without an attorney at times. And I can tell you, in a situation like this, when you are accused of a serious crime, you should have an attorney with you when you are dealing with the police. That did not happen in all of Tapp's interactions with police at the time. Now, here's a quote from the Innocence Project. They say, during the interviews, Tapp was threatened with the death penalty and was told he couldn't remember what he had done because he had repressed the memories of his brutal actions. Again, that's from the Innocence Project. He is then charged with murder, rape, and more. His attorney tries to get a confession suppressed. The judge doesn't fully allow that. In 1998, the jury convicts Tapp. He's sentenced to life in prison, minimums of 30 years for murder, 10 years for rape. Now, Tapp appeals for years. The Innocence Project picks up the case in 2007. The team requests DNA testing on hair found on the victim. That DNA excludes Tapp. He's not set free immediately, though. In 2016, his legal team argues Tapp's confession was the result of police coercion and deception. Video of 3 of the actual 7 polygraphs show that they had been withheld from Tapp's attorneys for his murder trial. So Tapp is then released from prison in 2017. That's about 20 years that he was dealing with the criminal justice system and in prison for so many years again. Now, the Innocence Project and police said they found the actual killer in 2019, a man named Brian Drips. Tapp's murder conviction is then vacated. Tapp filed a lawsuit against the city of Idaho Falls. He agreed to an $11.7 million settlement for that wrongful conviction. He connected with attorney John Thomas when he was fighting his case. They developed a bond, a relationship. I met Thomas after Tapp's death. I sat down with him. Here's what he had to say.
When he got released, he tried to get just a regular job. He worked at a plastic bag factory in Idaho Falls. He was just kind of a 9-to-5 kind of guy, shift work. And then he did that, I think, for about 2 years. And then after that, we filed our civil lawsuit, and he we got him some money together. He had gotten some pretty big loans, and so he was able to live off of that until we got the settlement. And once we got the settlement, he had really come into his own. He was working with the Idaho legislature as well as the Oregon legislature. He helped change laws to help exonerees get compensated for when they got out of prison for wrongful convictions. He was an advocate for prison reform. He had talked to legislators. Most recently, he had gotten into the car racing business. And so he thought that he wanted to race cars for a living. And so he got together with somebody who raced cars, asked him if he could be on their pit crew because he wanted to learn the business from the bottom up, and started to go travel the country with this racing team and was on their pit crew and learning the business. And unfortunately, Las Vegas was his last stop. They were here for a race, and they had a party in one of the suites that they had, and that's where he met his demise.
Let's take a break. Welcome back to High Heels and Hidden Truths. I'm Vanessa Murphy. We are continuing to take a look at the criminal case against Dan Rodimer. We took a look at the life briefly of Christopher Tapp. Now we are going to take a look at the wannabe politician, former pro wrestler. There he is, Dan Rodimer. He is accused of taking Christopher Tapp's life. Now, we'll get into the criminal case, but first, some highlights from Dan Rodimer's life. He's described himself as a family man, but when he ran for Congress back in 2020 here in Nevada, 911 calls surfaced from his now wife from when they dated. You will hear the calls, and then you will hear and see part of a brief interview, a brief soundbite from a longer interview I did with Rodimer when I asked him about the calls.
My ex-boyfriend entered my home and stole about $200,000 worth of jewelry.
How long ago?
And, 30 minutes.
Okay. Were you home when this happened?
No, but he sent me photographs.
Okay. What's his name?
Daniel Rodimer.
This is, yes, my wife and I got into an argument. She called the police. We got into a verbal argument. There was no physical touching ever. Nobody was arrested. Nobody was taken into custody. Nobody was brought off to jail. That was it. They came and they left. And later on that day, we went out to dinner. And the fact that she's, throwing this dirt up against the wall is absolutely terrible.
And when he's saying the fact that she's throwing this dirt, he is talking about his opponent who was referring to those calls in that race, of course, to show perhaps in her opinion that he didn't have the right character for office. Now, Rodimer did not win that seat here in Nevada. Then he went to Texas. He ran for office there. He didn't win that either. And then we really didn't hear much from Rodimer. That's until we learned about a warrant for his arrest. Let's take a break. Welcome back to High Heels and Hidden Truths. I'm Vanessa Murphy. We are continuing to take a look at the criminal case against Dan Rodimer, a wannabe politician and former pro wrestler now accused of taking another man's life. Now, back in 2024, we learned about an arrest warrant for Rodimer's arrest, and he essentially walked through jail, meaning he turned himself in and didn't spend a lot of time in jail. Then we obtained records to learn more about what exactly he was accused of. and we learned that the alleged victim, Christopher Tapp, had been at a party in a suite at Resorts World. Dan Rodimer was there too, and that Rhodimer, according to police, became upset that perhaps Christopher Tapp may have offered Rhodimer's adult stepdaughter cocaine. And then he's accused of assaulting Christopher Tapp. Now, Christopher Tapp then went to the hospital. There was no homicide investigation. Tapp did not immediately pass away, but he passes away. And then after that, or as that's happening, his family, his loved ones are asking questions, because the story was that perhaps Tapp fell inside this suite, and that's how he was hurt, and that's what led to his death. But his loved ones thought, that doesn't sound right. So they contact police here in Las Vegas, and police start investigating. Take a look. That's right, Ken.
Dan Rodimer dressed as shirtless Ken, celebrating race car driver John Odom in big lights at Resorts World. This is the same night the former pro wrestler and ex-Congressional candidate is accused of killing Christopher Tapp inside Odom's luxury suite. According to court transcripts, no one at the party called 911, only security was called, and Odom claimed Tapp slipped on a pair of slippers which were never found. Despite head injuries and bruising to Tapp's jaw, police still weren't called. But then Tapp's loved ones realized it all seemed suspicious.
Do you think this criminal case would have happened without loved ones initially asking more questions?
Yeah, I don't think it would have materialized, because without people asking more questions, it just seemed like it may have been an accident.
Tapp's friend, John Thomas, sat down with the 8 News Now investigators in March. He was also Tapp's attorney. Tapp had been wrongfully convicted of murder and sexual assault in Idaho and spent 2 decades in prison. In 2019, the conviction was vacated. Tapp won a settlement. Here in October, he had been a sponsor at Odom's event. Witness Danny Lyons testified in secret grand jury proceedings. She's a friend of Rhodimer's model stepdaughter. Lyons says they were in a bathroom at the suite doing cocaine. Tapp comes in, offers them coke. They decline. Rhodimer walks in and tells Tapp, "If you give my daughter any of that, I will expletive kill you." Rhodimer's wife, Sarah, dressed as Barbie, tries to calm him down. He leaves, then later runs into the room and attacks Tapp. Lyons recalls hearing thumping noises and seeing Rhodimer tackle, punch, and choke Tapp while he's on the floor. She says Tapp just took it. She calls Rhodimer sneaky for disappearing from the party. The next day, she says Sarah Rhodimer calls her to meet. While her daughter Bella is there, she says Sarah tells her if anyone asks her about what happened, including law enforcement, to say she didn't see anything. But police say in a text message to her husband, Sarah wrote, "I watched you murder somebody. Like, let that sink in, you psychopath." A grand jury indicted Rhodimer for murder. He's currently out of custody after posting $200,000 bail.
It's a new life, a new beginning.
Christopher Tapp died 6 days after he was taken out on a stretcher from Resorts World. He was an organ donor.
Now, you can see what sort of evidence police say they had, like the text messages, witness testimony, and more. But again, there is that allegation that Christopher Tapp may have offered Rhodimer's stepdaughter cocaine. And I felt like it was important to ask his friend and attorney, John Thomas, about that. Here's what Thomas told me.
What I know about Chris is that he was not a cocaine user. I don't know, maybe he used it one time, maybe this was a, hey, I'm in Vegas, let's try different things. But this wasn't something that he normally did. It was certainly outside of his wheelhouse of, how he normally acted.
Now, I also asked John Thomas about the loved ones starting to ask questions and realizing that Tapp probably did not pass away from a fall. Take a listen.
He got into this altercation, went into the hospital. His mother was called and said, hey, you need to come, Chris is in the hospital. She immediately contacted me and said, hey, I'm going down to Las Vegas. I need, can you come with me? And I said, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm actually flying out to Florida because my father had just passed away, and I was there to go to his funeral. And she said, okay, I understand. So we talked for a good 6-7 days while she was in Las Vegas, here in Las Vegas, caring for him, trying to figure it out. And then on the 7th day when he finally passed, she called me and said, he's passed away. We now have to start preparing for a funeral. And so I immediately got on a plane and flew back. It just didn't make any sense to us. And so at the funeral, the questions really kind of started rolling out, and we started piecing together all of these odd things that had happened, and we couldn't make heads or tails of it. And so somebody in the inner circle, I don't know who it was, but somebody called the Las Vegas Metro Police Department and had them start to investigate. And when they started to investigate, their interactions with different witnesses didn't add up either. And so they started to think, hey, this might be a homicide. And so they contacted the coroner's office and had them do a review of the autopsy, and it turns out that it was ruled a homicide.
Imagine that. Tapp's mother, Vera, and his loved ones helping to spur this as a homicide investigation. Let's take a break. Welcome back to High Heels and Hidden Truths. I'm Vanessa Murphy. We are continuing to take a look at the criminal case against Dan Rodimer. We are recording this in March of 2026. Rhodimer still faces a murder charge. He is not in custody. And Christopher Tapp's mother says she is waiting for justice. Again, the second time waiting for justice for her son. The first time when he was wrongfully convicted and spent years in prison. This family has been through so much. I talked with Vera at one of the last court appearances for Rhodimer late last year, late 2025. Here's what she told me.
The reason I'm here is to get justice for Christopher. That's all I want, is to get justice for Christopher, because I am his voice. And there's, I'm not vindictive or anything. I just want justice for Christopher. I want this person to serve whatever comes his way. That's it. Christopher didn't deserve this. Didn't deserve this at all. I mean, he was just starting out his life and doing what he wanted to do. And that's all I want.
They say there is nothing like a mother's pain, a parent's pain after they lose a child. And again, Vera Tapp mourning the loss of her son, but not only that, this is again after he was wrongfully convicted for years. And then to make matters worse, it's difficult for her to see these court appearances constantly coming, no trial just yet. And she sees the man accused of killing her son not in custody. That is so frustrating for her. Now, she has filed a civil lawsuit in connection with her son's alleged murder, and questions still remain, right? According to police, individuals at that party at Resorts World knew what happened. and did not immediately tell the truth. At this point, we don't see any charges against Sarah Rhodimer, Rhodimer's wife, where police pulled her text messages. At this point, we still don't see any charges from John Odom, which, according to police, he did not tell the truth. So questions still remain, and I am still looking into this criminal case. Now, in closing, I want to give Christopher Tapp the final word. You will hear him after he became a free man after his wrongful conviction.
Thankful that I've been given this second chance at life. I've wasted 20 years of my life for something that I never did. But again, I also grew up in this 20 years. The world has changed again. 2 years ago, I accepted the fact that I was going to be a convicted felon, and I didn't have certain rights. I couldn't do certain things, and I couldn't go to certain places and live a different life. Now I don't ever have to worry about that. It's a new life, a new beginning, a new world for me. And I'm just going to enjoy it every day, but I will still continue doing what I've been doing, going to work and living the life that I should have been living for the last 22 and a half years.
Now, Vera Tapp, Christopher Tapp's mother, according to John Thomas, wanted to be 100% sure that police had the right suspect. They say their suspect is Dan Rodimer, but she wanted to be 100% sure that police were sure because she knew what happened to her son with his wrongful conviction. Thanks for joining us for High Heels and Hidden Truth.